Yeah, Lynn is a lot more, she's a lot more forgiving than I am. She's a sweet Christian lady, folks. She's one of Wyoming's finest. I mean that. Sincerely do. Hey, I want to do a couple things here before we get our next speaker going. And Douglas, I don't know where you're at, but you're on deck here. And but I do want to thank all of you for coming out. This is absolutely amazing. I don't know how many people we have here, but the crowd keeps going. Yes. It wouldn't surprise me we have 300-400 people out here. This is awesome. I also want to thank Jennifer Burns. Jennifer has been phenomenal. I put this thing out here. In fact, and a couple other things to go around too. And I'll have Lon speak up in a little bit. But I don't know, about 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine, brother in Christ, Lee Green, and Lon and I, we met and we were talking about these things and what do we need to do? We need to get the ball rolling, and this is a result of that. Yep. So I want to thank those men for doing that, but I also want to thank those that stepped up. As soon as we put something out there, I had people message me all across the state saying, "Hey, what can we do to help? What can we set up?" And so this podium here, there's a sound system. I want to thank Chris, First Amendment Sound Productions. Thank him for setting this up. Really appreciate this. As was mentioned, our governor went ahead this last Saturday and he extended those orders. I mean, it's the coward's way out. It really is. Not going to get on TV, not going to do what he's done before, not going to have his little press conference with NPR and all that kind of stuff, or whatever it is, Wyoming NPR, I don't know what it is. But he didn't do any of that this time around. No, he was going to kind of fly by night. We'll go ahead and extend these orders, and of course, he let back on the restrictions for bars and restaurants, and he expanded the mask mandate. So we're all supposed to be under a mask mandate. And I thought about this. You know, at some of these kind of rallies, you see the radical left, and they go out there and they burn Bibles and they burn flags. You know what I think about burning? Masks.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm doing. This is what I think. Good thing we got this Germ-X here. You know, hand sanitizer. Good thing. And this is what I think, honestly. This is what I think of the governor's mask mandate.
Yeah.
Well, it's burning. Don't touch it. It's actually burning. You can't see the flame. Be careful. It might be burning in there.
Do it again.
Oh, no, it's burning. You can't see the flame, but it's burning. It's burning. And we got some others. We might light some of those on fire. That's what we think of the governor's mask mandate. Douglas, you're on deck. Come on up.
I'm Dr. Douglas Petersma. I'm an educator and an education researcher, as well as a Wyoming small business owner. Most importantly, for the purposes of the rally today, I'm a citizen of the great state of Wyoming. I have called Wyoming my home since 1982, and even during the years when I was away from the state in military service, I was proud to display my Wyoming flag and to extol her conservative values. Recently, I have noted that many of those who we call to represent us are failing to do so, primarily in their assaults on liberty or their lack of action against the same, as well as their unresponsiveness to their constituents. By the looks of how many we have here today, I can say that I'm not the only one that's noticed that. It seems that election campaigns are designed to make us believe that candidates will uphold the constitutions of the United States of America and of the state of Wyoming, while in practice many of these individuals act in opposition to their campaign promises and against the constitutions they are sworn to uphold. Now, we know this doesn't apply to all. I am grateful for Representative Clem, not only for organizing this event, but for his years of faithful service to the state of Wyoming, particularly his steadfast devotion to constitutional principles and conservative Wyoming values. This applies to others as well, some that were mentioned before by Representative Clem, my own representative in the House, Clarence Stivar, is here today, and others who have shown unrelenting resoluteness in their decision-making. But along with these that I have mentioned, I know there's a small group in the Wyoming legislature that we can always count on.
Due to the damage to the sidewalk, we don't want to light the stuff on fire.
What happened? They spray painted the sidewalk and you guys covered it up. There were vandals here that spray painted the sidewalk and they went and lit Terry Bison Ranch on fire. You
along with those, and we're grateful for those in the legislature, those who stand in the gap between liberty and tyranny. Unfortunately, this is not universal to all our elected officials. As it relates to state public health mandates, and I am not a medical professional, therefore I will make no arguments in that respect today. I'll reserve those for those who have the qualifications to do so. But my main concern is liberty, personal liberty, the individual liberty of every citizen of this state. I'm grateful for our local law enforcement agencies and district attorneys' offices all over the state who have made public statements about the unenforceability and the unconstitutionality of these health orders. I thank them for their steadfast commitment to public safety, which is their #1 priority. For those of us here in Laramie County, I would like to publicly thank District Attorney Leanne Manlove and salute our Sheriff and Cheyenne Chief of Police Kozak, as well as their officers and their staffs. But the Wyoming Health Department is promoting the slogan, "This situation is now and not forever." Anybody heard that so far?
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question. Once a government begins to control something, do they typically give up that control spontaneously? Once a government begins collecting a tax, how often is that tax collection halted when the original purpose to justify it was met? Now, I know there are certain and rare isolated incidents where this does happen, but as an overall rule, when the government gets its hands on something, it is very difficult to get that stranglehold released. To do so requires an active populace engaged in politics and willing to take necessary action, up to and including the removal of elected officials who are failing to serve the people they were elected to serve. That is why I am here today, and that is why I believe many of you are here today. The founding fathers of our country understood the need to restrain government, which is why limited government is a driving principle behind the Constitution. I say is because it's not in the past, it still is. And the recent actions of our state government do not reflect this principle of limited government and constitute a direct threat to the liberty of its citizenry. Even with the rollbacks on some restrictions that have been recently announced, as was mentioned before, damage has already been done and the precedent has been established, which will allow future enactment of such decrees with even less justification. John Adams said, "The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with the power to endanger the public liberty." I call upon our state legislative bodies to enact such provisions as necessary, up to and including constitutional amendments that will prevent the executive branch of our state government and unelected bureaucrats in state offices from making decrees, edicts, mandates, or other proclamations which restrict the individual liberty of Wyoming citizens. Such actions should be relegated to their proper place in the government, which resides with the legislative body, the constitutionality of which is to be adjudicated in the courts, if necessary, and enforced by the executive branch and its duly appointed offices and officers. That is how our government is set up. Thomas Jefferson said, "God who gave us life gave us liberty." Those words are inscribed on the memorial that bears his name, and this precept led him to author the line in the Declaration of Independence, which unequivocally affirms liberty, among other rights, is endowed to its citizens by their Creator. As such, it is not a commodity of the state to be granted or withheld based on situational ethics. I call upon all elected officials at every level of government to acknowledge that rights belong to the people as a gift from God. These rights do not originate nor proceed from the state. Therefore, it is not the prerogative of the state at any level of government to dismiss these unalienable rights under the guise of public safety, and then to benevolently reestablish those rights, if ever, after the perceived crisis has abated. As I stated before, I'm not a medical professional, and I'll avoid arguments that are best left to the doctors. However, I am a researcher, and as such, I believe I have a reasonable grasp on the concepts of correlation and causation. You don't even need to be a researcher to understand that two things happening at the same time might correlate, but it doesn't mean that the one caused the other. Governor Gordon, you called many citizens of your state knuckleheads, making an unfounded causal link between those who don't wear masks and an increased number of detected COVID cases. I do not believe this is an argument based on statistical evidence, none of which that I have seen presented to the people of the state, although I welcome you to present such evidence at your earliest convenience. But even the statistics put on the Wyoming Department of Health website do not support this conclusion. Additionally, the restrictions on small businesses don't even pass the common sense check. Like I said, you don't need to be a researcher to see that when you go out to a national chain business and see it cram-packed with people, And then you see the restrictions on small businesses. What that does is it presumes the incompetence of the owners, and it presumes an uncaring attitude among managers and staff. If I may be so bold as to speak for small business owners of Wyoming, we are neither incompetent nor uncaring. We are also not knuckleheads. From the very beginning of this COVID outbreak, the state and most media organizations have been hyper-focused on the number of lab-confirmed and suspected cases without appropriate contextual information, such as the number of tests being conducted, the number of positive retests, the confluence of comorbidity factors with reported deaths, and the predictable annual pattern of viral infections, just to name a few. We all understand that situations like this can be very complex, and we do have compassion for those who are impacted by it. But to make statewide mandates which restrict personal liberty based on information that is partial at best is not consistent with the constitutional principle of personal liberty. Governor Gordon, I would caution you and other elected officials not to tamper with individual liberty because of the expediency of a media-fueled crisis. Ben Franklin once said, "Those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." We must not sacrifice the invaluable treasure of personal liberty on the altar of perceived safety and public health. Woodrow Wilson stated that the history of liberty is a history of resistance. A history of liberty is a history of the limitation of government power, not the increase of it. Governor Gordon, senators and representatives of the state of Wyoming, county commissioners, city councilmen, do not recklessly discard the personal liberty of the citizens of Wyoming for the political convenience of a power grab, lest Wyoming citizens rise up and remind you that you are stewards of the state and federal constitution, not lords and masters of your constituency. I'll finish with the words of Daniel Webster, who said, "The contest for ages has been to rescue liberty from the grasp of executive power, and so it remains today. Elected officials, you are accountable to the people, and we intend to hold you accountable." Citizens of Wyoming, thank you for coming out and making your voices heard. God bless the state of Wyoming and the United States of America.